Hello everyone, welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy Hindu News Analysis. So today is 9th May 2024 and today we will have a few important articles to discuss. And before discussing all those important news articles, let's try to solve a practice question that I have given to you yesterday. So this is also a very important practice question. The question is, which of the following committees recommended 27% reservation for the other backward classes? So these are the backward classes who are socially and educationally backward classes. So the correct answer for this question is Mandal Commission. So Mandal Commission actually recommended 27% reservation for the other backward classes, or otherwise called as socially and educationally backward classes. Now this Mandal Commission is officially known as the Social and Educationally Backward Classes Commission. Okay, this is SEBC, Socially and Educationally Backward Classes Commission, and this Mandal Commission was first established or set up in 1st January 1974 by the Indian government under the then Prime Minister Morarji Desai. So Morarji Desai, the then Prime Minister, has set up this Mandal Commission in 1979. So what was the task of the Mandal Commission? So identify these socially and educationally backward classes and provide them the benefits of reservation. So the commission was chaired by MP. He was member of parliament BP Mandal. And the chief mandate of the Mandal Commission was to identify the socially and educationally backward classes across India, and at the same time consider the matter of reservation for the socially and educationally backward classes. Now reservations are very important to correct the historical injustice done to these backward classes. So therefore there are certain caste inequalities and discrimination which is being faced by the socially and educationally backward classes. So therefore the Mandal Commission has recommended 27% of the reservation for the other backward classes. And in fact this committee submitted its report to the president on 31st December 1980. So this is briefly about the Mandal Commission, and this is important, so just remember this. So today also I have one practice question. So that is, city of Rafah, frequently seen in news, is located in which of the following countries or regions? So I've given you 4 options: A, Egypt; B, Lebanon; C, Gaza Strip; and D, Israel. So this is very important, and this year you may expect a question on this. In fact, UPSC may also ask about the city of Rafah as part of one of the prelims question. So therefore try to answer this question in the comment section, and I'll be giving you the correct answer in next class. So let's try to discuss few important articles. The first important article is with respect to the Central Bureau of Investigation. Now in fact the Central Bureau of Investigation is frequently in news. So why? Because there are several states. We need to talk about the West Bengal. So West Bengal recently withdrawn the general consent for the CBI. So CBI can investigate the cases in the state, or the matters which falls under the state jurisdiction, but CBI must requires the general consent to investigate, or general consent. It is known as general consent or permission. So therefore CBI must require this general consent to investigate any matter which falls under the jurisdiction of state. However, recently the West Bengal government has withdrawn this general consent to the CBI. So even after withdrawing the general consent, the CBI has been still entering into the state and investigating several matters. So therefore, a few states which have approached the Supreme Court regarding the violation of these federal principles. And in fact, they also alleged that the center has been using these institutions to destroy the existing federal structure. Now in this context we will briefly understand what is CBI, when it was formed, what are the functions of the CBI, and what exactly is this current dispute. Now briefly understand the context of this article. So the context is that Supreme Court on Wednesday refused to accept at face value the center's claim that it has no control over the Central Bureau of Investigation. So in fact, the Central Bureau of Investigation is actually falls under the Ministry of Personnel, Pensions and Public Grievances. So just understand this, it doesn't falls under the Ministry of Home Affairs, rather it falls under the Ministry of Personnel. So therefore, recently in the Supreme Court, the center has said that it has no control over the Central Bureau of Investigation. So therefore, the investigation that is being conducted by the CBI will not be directed by the center, and this is what the center's response in front of the Supreme Court. However, the Supreme Court has refused to accept this argument from the center. And in fact, the Supreme Court has also asked who else can control or who else can send the premier investigating agency to state to investigate the cases. So if it is not the center, who will send CBI to the states to investigate these cases? And this is what the Supreme Court has directly said to the submission of the central government. Now, in this context, what exactly is the Central Bureau of Investigation? So please understand, this Central Bureau of Investigation is actually a domestic crime investigation agency in India. Okay, so in fact we can call it as a premier domestic crime investigation agency in India. So it deals with a wide variety of matters. And also understand, it falls under the purview or it operates under the jurisdiction of Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievances and Policies. So this was actually the ministry which actually controls the Central Bureau of Investigation, but not the Home Ministry. So I hope it is clear for you. And apart from that, the Central Bureau of Investigation also provides assistance to the Central Vigilance Commission and at the same time the Lokpal. So we all knew that in order to investigate the corruption related matters, the Lokpal at the central level and Lokayukta at the state governments level were constituted, and at the same time the Central Vigilance Commission was also constituted to deal with the corruption related matters. So therefore the Central Bureau of Investigation in fact complements and at the same time assists both Central Vigilance Commission and Lokpal bodies. Now, how the Central Bureau of Investigation is formed? Now, what is the procedure for the formation of Central Bureau of Investigation, or how it was established earlier? So in fact, the Central Bureau of Investigation actually traces its origins from the Special Police Establishment Act. So this Special Police Establishment Act was passed before independence. During the British times, the Special Police Establishment Act, it is also known as SPE, Special Police Establishment Act. So it was passed before the independence. Okay, so this particular legislation provides for a central government police force. And this was established in 1941, so before independence, and that was also the time when World War II has been taking place. So therefore, the Special Police Establishment Act, which was passed or established in 1941, was established to investigate the cases of bribery and corruption in transactions which are related to the Second World War and the Supply Department of India. And this is the purpose for which the CBI was earlier set up, earlier established before independence in the year 1941. However, after the end of war, after the end of Second World War. So Second World War was ended after 5 years, 1944. So after the end of the war, there was a continued need for the central government agencies such as CBI. So therefore, they have continued the Central Bureau of Investigation even after the war. But the original purpose was to investigate the cases related to bribery and corruption was established. For this particular purpose, CBI was established. Okay, so after the war also, to investigate the cases related to bribery and corruption, the CBI was further continued under Special Police Establishment Act. Now in 1946, Delhi Special Police Establishment Act was passed. Okay, so under this Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, this CBI's powers were further enlarged, or the scope of CBI was further enlarged or widened. Now, earlier it is covering only corruption and bribery related matters under Special Powers Establishment Act. Okay, now the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946, the scope of the CBI, so the scope of Premier Investigating Agency was further widened. So now it includes different departments under its purview. So therefore, its jurisdiction has been clearly extended to the union territories, and at the same time it could be further extended to the states with the consent, and this consent is known as general consent. So if state governments have given general consent, then the purview or the jurisdiction of the CBI can be further extended to the state governments as well. So because of that reason it is in news, and at the same time there are a lot of state governments, for example Kerala, West Bengal, so they have withdrawn the general consent for the CBI. So once they were withdrawn the general consent, CBI cannot investigate the matters in those states. Okay, so now this Delhi Special Police Establishment Act has actually acquired its popular current name, Central Bureau of Investigation. Okay, so this Delhi Special Police Establishment Act has further modified into Central Bureau of Investigation through a Home Ministry resolution that was passed in 1st April 1963, and that is how the Central Bureau of Investigation was actually formed. Okay, now understand some functions of the Central Bureau of Investigation. Now, what are the functions of the Central Bureau of Investigation? So first and foremost and most important function of CBI is it actually investigate corruption related crimes. Okay, so investigation of cases which falls under the Prevention of Corruption Act. This was passed in the year 1989. Okay, so CBI is actually tasked with investigating cases which falls under the Prevention of Corruption Act against the public officials. So for example, taking briberies, committing corruption by the public officials and employees of the central government, public sector undertakings, corporations, bodies which are owned or controlled by the government of India. So all these bodies or organizations falls under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So Prevention of Corruption Act in a holistic manner is dealt by the Central Bureau of Investigation. And next, the Central Bureau of Investigation is also tasked with the economic crimes as well, because please understand the Delhi Special Powers Establishment Act has actually widened the scope of the Central Bureau of Investigation. So because it has widened the scope of Central Bureau of Investigation, now it has been dealing with the wide variety of cases. So CBI is also tasked with investigation of the economic crimes as well. So what kind of economic crimes or financial scams? For example, crimes relating to fake Indian currency notes, such as counterfeiting of currency, and bank frauds, cybercrime, bank frauds, import-export of foreign exchange and their violations, large-scale smuggling of narcotics such as drugs, drug trafficking, drug smuggling. So everything comes under the financial crimes, and all those financial crimes are dealt by the Central Bureau of Investigation. So Central Bureau of Investigation actually investigate all these matters. And apart from anti-corruption crimes and also economic crimes, the CBI also investigates certain special crimes. For example, there are certain crimes which are heinous in nature, which are serious in nature, and they are committed by the organized crime networks. So then also the CBI intervenes and investigates the cases. And in fact, the Indian Penal Code and other laws, on the request of the state government, the CBI actually start investing such serious cases. And in fact, if the state government wanted to hand over any case to the CBI, can CBI take up such case? And apart from that, the High Court or the Supreme Court can voluntarily hand over any case to the CBI for the purpose of investigation. And at the same time, the state governments can also issue general consent for the CBI to openly investigate any case in the state. So this is how CBI actually investigate cases across different states and union territories. And in fact, the CBI can also investigate cases on the orders of the Supreme Court and High Court. Most importantly, so cases which are being ordered by the Supreme Court and High Court to be investigated by the CBI include cases of terrorism, bomb blasts, kidnapping for ransom or kidnapping for money, and crimes committed by the mafia and underworld networks and organized crime groups. So everything is dealt by the Central Bureau of Investigation. Okay, so please understand the Central Bureau of Investigation is a premier investigating body of India, and it actually investigate cases related to anti-corruption crimes, economic crimes, and at the same time certain special crimes. Now, why it is in news? Why CBI is in news? Now, first and foremost, you have to understand Article 131 of the Indian Constitution. Now, Article 131 of the Indian Constitution specially confers exclusive jurisdiction on the part of the Supreme Court. Okay, so Article 131 confers exclusive jurisdiction to the Supreme Court. So that is not available for the High Court, but only exclusive jurisdiction to the Supreme Court. So what was this exclusive jurisdiction? To hear disputes between the government of India and one or more states, or between two or more states. So that is Article 131 of the Indian Constitution. So it provides exclusive jurisdiction to the Supreme Court to hear the disputes between the center and one or two states and two or more states. Okay, so that is Article 131 of the Indian Constitution. Now under Article 131 of the Constitution, the state governments are started accusing the union government of interfering in cases originating within the state's jurisdiction by unilaterally authorizing the CBI to probe them. I hope you have understood exactly what has been happened. Now please understand carefully that the state governments are actually accusing the union government of breaching their jurisdiction, violating their jurisdiction by sending CBI into those states which have already withdrawn the general consent for the Central Bureau of Investigation. So therefore, those states have approached the Supreme Court under Article 131 of the Constitution, because 131 provides exclusive jurisdiction for the Supreme Court. Under this exclusive jurisdiction, the Supreme Court can hear the disputes between the center and the state governments. So because of that reason, the states have actually approached the Supreme Court under Article 131 of the Constitution. Now, the center continues to employ or use CBI, though the state had already withdrawn its general consent to the Central Bureau of Investigation. In fact, investigations within the territory of the state under Section 6 of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. So that is actually the problem. Even after states withdrawing their general consent, the center has been using CBI to investigate the cases which falls under the jurisdiction of these different states. However, the center was questioned by the Supreme Court, and in response, the center said that center had no role in where and how CBI is actually conducted its investigation. This is what the center has said to the Supreme Court. And after this response, the Supreme Court has directly asked the center, then who will be controlling the Central Bureau of Investigation? If it is not you, then who will be controlling Central Bureau of Investigation? So that is in news. And in fact, here we should also highlight Section 5 Clause 1 of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. So in fact, this Section 5 Clause 1 actually authorizes the central government to pass orders extending to any area, so that including railways areas also, in a state not being a union territory. So therefore, the powers and jurisdiction of the members of Delhi Special Police Establishment, that is CBI. So Section 5 Clause 1 of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act actually empowers the central government to extend its jurisdiction over any area, not union territory, but any area within the state. So using these powers, the center has actually been deploying the Central Bureau of Investigation to different states, and because of that reason, it is in news. The states say that it has been violating the jurisdiction of the states, and at the same time, the center has also destroying the federal structure of the Indian Constitution. Now here you can clearly understand the CBI structure. So just pause the video and go through the structure of the CBI. Now briefly, when we talk about this, the suit could not be amended to make CBI a defendant, as it was not a state under Article 131 of the Constitution. And apart from that, the Article 131 could only be filed for disputes involving center and states. The Supreme Court has clearly said that Article 131 will not involve the disputes which are respect to the Central Bureau of Investigation. Rather, they are related to the genuine disputes between the center and state governments. So this is what is about the Central Bureau of Investigation and the ongoing dispute between the union government and the state governments over the deployment of Central Bureau of Investigation into these states. So next important news article is with respect to India's solar energy generation or solar energy production. So according to this article, it is suggesting that India is now the third largest producer of solar power. So India has been producing the third largest amount of the solar power. Now what is the context of this particular article? So please understand, now India emerged as the world's third largest producer of solar power. So first and foremost thing that we need to understand about the solar energy is a renewable form of energy, or it is known as renewable energy. So renewable energy in the sense that we can produce energy without actually depleting the resources. So therefore it is a renewable form of energy, and at the same time it is also unconventional source of energy, and it is also one of the clean fuel because it does not come up with any greenhouse gas emissions, and at the same time it is also one of the potential alternatives to the use of fossil fuels such as coal, and at the same time we can also significantly reduce the negative impact such as climate change on the environment. So because of all these advantages, every country is now focused on producing electricity through renewables such as the solar energy. And in fact, if you look at India's progress in last one decade, India actually made a tremendous progress with respect to the solar energy production. So because of that tremendous progress, India now emerged as the third largest producer of solar energy. And India actually surpassed Japan, and this is data according to the Global Electricity Review Report 2024. Okay, so this is also important for your prelims perspective, and in fact you can also quote these data in your mains exam as well. So if you look at the solar energy at the global scale, so the total solar energy capacity, or global contribution of solar energy, it is 5.5% of the total energy mix. So imagine that we are producing electricity from different sources, for example hydroelectricity and thermal power plants electricity, nuclear energy. So out of all these different sources of energy production, the solar energy alone contributing to the 5.5% of the total energy basket. And in fact, India's solar energy generation from the total contribution of solar energy in India is 5.8% of its total electricity production. So just remember this data. This data is very important because you can quote this data in your answers, right? So if you look at India's solar power ranking, as we have already discussed, that India has overtaken Japan, and India became the third largest solar power generator in the world. And in fact, the solar energy has been contributing significantly for the generation of electricity in India and even world also. Right? So the renewable energy. So renewable energy, when we talk about this renewable energy, it includes different sources of energy. For example, wind energy can be considered as a renewable energy, and solar energy can also be considered as this renewable energy. So both wind energy and solar energy are actually contributing to 30% of the total electricity production from the renewables alone. So within the renewables, actually they are contributing to the 30% of the global electricity. And at the same time, if we include clean energy sources, for example, nuclear energy is known as clean energy because it does not come up with any negative emissions. But it is not unconventional, rather it is conventional, because here we use uranium as a raw material for the production of nuclear energy. So first uranium is being mined, and then we will use uranium for the purpose of production of nuclear energy. So therefore, clean energy, including nuclear power, actually comprising total 40% of the total energy production in the world. And at the same time, the carbon intensity across the globe has also been fast reducing. Okay, so the surge in renewable energy has led to the 12% decrease in the carbon intensity of global electricity since 2007. Now, what exactly is the carbon intensity here? We will try and understand briefly what exactly is this carbon intensity. Now, carbon intensity actually means that while generating electricity, so how much carbon is emitted into the atmosphere is known as the carbon intensity. For example, if you look at the thermal power plants, they emit a huge amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. So therefore the carbon intensity of thermal power plants is very high. But on the other hand, if you look at renewables like wind energy and solar energy, their carbon intensity is very low, and because of that reason we have significantly reduced the carbon intensity of the electricity production by 12%. And at the same time, the solar energy growth is also achieved. Significant solar energy growth is also achieved in last 1 or 2 decades. However, even though we have achieved solar energy growth, the challenges still remain. So challenges like reduced hydropower production due to drought-like conditions, and solar energy, in fact, remains the fastest growing electricity source globally for the 19th consecutive year. Okay, so these are some challenges which are actually associated with the solar power production. Now, if you look at India's total solar energy generation, so it has increased by 18 terawatt hour. Okay, so 18 terawatt hours. So this is what India's increased solar energy production capacity. So therefore, India was positioned 4th globally behind China, United States and Brazil. Okay, so in fact, US, China and Brazil together contributing to the 75% of global increase in the solar energy generation or solar energy production. Okay, so global solar energy growth. Now, global solar energy generation in 2023 is actually over 6 times higher than the 2025. For example, imagine that in 2025 we are producing around 20 gigawatt of solar energy across the globe. So this is just an example. So by the year 2023, so this has been increased 6 times. So 6 times means 120 gigawatt. So that is actually a huge increase compared to the past decade. Okay. So the next important news article is with respect to the human development in India, right? So the Human Development Index. The Human Development Index is actually released by the United Nations Development Program, right? So this Human Development Index actually looks into the life expectancy of birth and average years of education, and at the same time the standard of living. That also includes the gross national product per capita. So all these factors would be taken into consideration to measure the Human Development Index of any country. Now we'll understand this context of this particular editorial. The context is that a recent Human Development Report actually highlights that India's development challenges and the need for a comprehensive strategy for the progress. Okay, so despite India faring better in the Human Development Index, the problem is that India still lags behind many of its neighboring countries such as Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal. So therefore, this Human Development Index has actually highlighted that India still needs to do a lot of work with respect to the human development. So therefore, we will understand what are the challenges, what should be the way forward, and how India can build its human development over a period of time. Now, if you look at India's ranking on Human Development Index, and at the same time, the Gender Inequality Index. Okay, so the HDI ranking of India, in the year 2022. So India's ranking on the Human Development Index improved slightly in the 2022. Okay, so reaching 134. So in the year 2022, India's Human Development Index rank was 134 out of 193 countries. So even though we have achieved 134th rank out of 193 countries, we're still lagging behind many of our neighboring countries, including Bhutan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, in terms of human development, and that is something we must look into. We must introspect ourselves. So apart from the Human Development Index, we should also look at the Gender Inequality Index. Now, if you look at India, the gender inequalities are actually at highest levels. Okay, so a wide disparity that we can observe between men and women in India. And in fact, in this Gender Inequality Index also, India slightly improved in the year 2022. Okay, so even though we have seen a slight improvement in the Gender Inequality Index also. Okay, so Gender Inequality Index was is actually released by World Economic Forum. still it faces significant gender disparities. Okay, so it is still facing significant gender divides, gender disparities, particularly with respect to the labor force participation rates. Now, why labor force participation rates are lesser in women is because of the workplace harassment is one reason, and apart from workplace harassment, the gender pay gap is another reason, and at the same time, the society is stereotyping the working woman are the factors which are actually responsible for the labor force participation rates declining. So with this substantial gap between men and women with respect to the gender gap or gender pay gap. And at the same time, we should also understand the global inequality trends as well. Now, if you can observe the global inequality trends, the concern is that the wealth has been concentrated within a few hands. Now, we are regularly discussing that 1% of the population in India actually own more than 40% of the India's wealth. So that is a concern, and it is not just limited to India, but that we can see across the world, and that is a problem. Okay, so therefore the Human Development Index actually raised the issue of the concentration of wealth and growing the levels of inequality across the globe. Okay, so there is actually a significant economic concentration within few countries, and that actually exacerbated the disparities and even limiting the agency of the marginalized population. So that is not actually giving the marginalized sections, the socially and educationally backward classes, an opportunity to use their abilities or the opportunity to in fact develop the capacities. So if you can understand about the Human Development Index, it is actually based on the capability approach that is actually designed by the Amartya Sen, a Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. So therefore, we must provide opportunities, equal opportunities for all, and at the same time, we should also make sure that the backward classes of the society should be able to develop their capacities. Okay, so that those opportunities can be best utilized by them. However, there are certain concerns about the rising inequalities or concentration of the economic power. Now, what will be the impact on India with respect to these inequalities? So India is also having the highest levels of inequality, but whether it is gender inequality, the income inequality, and regional inequalities. So all these inequalities and highest levels of inequalities in India actually highlight the need to address the income disparities. We must address these income disparities, which are actually higher than those observed in the neighboring countries like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So in India, these gender disparities and even the wealth related disparities are highest even compared to our neighboring countries, and that is a concern, and that is where we need to work on it. And after that, there are certain implications also with the income inequality. Now, as I have already told you that the wealth is concentrated, and poor people who are actually responsible for creation of demand in the economy. So with the demand, productivity increases. With the productivity, it creates a lot of employment, economic growth and economic development actually takes place. So therefore, poor people or middle classes, below middle classes people actually play a most important role with respect to creation of robust demand in the economy. So however, the World Inequality Lab actually underscores the widening of income gap in India. So the income gap has actually been widening in India, and top percentile population who are earning significantly more than the rest of the population. Okay, so top 1%, top 10% of India's population have actually been earning a lot of money, and wealth is also concentrated compared to the bottom 90% or bottom 50% of the India's population. So in fact, the bottom 50 or 90% of the population actually responsible for the creation of demand, and they are also responsible for the consumption, and that will further ensure the human welfare. Right? For example, imagine that in an economy which has a highest demand. So highest demand means new investments, FDIs will come in, new investments will come in, and it creates a lot of employment opportunities, and it results in economic growth, economic development, and at the same time the social security and social safety nets for the population. Okay, so therefore the bottom 90% of the population plays a very important role in the economic growth and economic development. So we must focus on the redistribution of wealth across all the sections equitably. We must focus on reducing the concentration of wealth within few hands. So at the same time, the household debt has also been significantly increasing. So India's household debt levels have reached a record high, accompanying low savings and high debt burdens. So all these factors have been highlighting that India need to do a lot of work on improving its human development index, and at the same time we must also deal with the rising inequalities across different segments. So the next important news article is with respect to the AstraZeneca. Okay, so we all knew that most of us have actually received this AstraZeneca's vaccine. Okay, so that we have received Covishield vaccine. So Covishield was the vaccine that most common people in India have actually received. So apart from Covishield, we also have Covaxin. So this Covaxin vaccine was manufactured by Bharat Biotech. But on the other hand, the Covishield vaccine was manufactured by Serum Institute of India, tying up with the AstraZeneca. Okay, so now this AstraZeneca actually withdraws its COVID-19 vaccine. So why it withdrawn the COVID-19 vaccine, we will understand very briefly, right? So the context is that UK based a pharmaceutical major, a pharmaceutical company called AstraZeneca, has started global withdrawal of its COVID-19 vaccine. Okay, so it started withdrawing its COVID-19 vaccine. In fact, this particular COVID-19 vaccine is provided, COVID-19 vaccine which is manufactured by AstraZeneca is provided in India with the name Covishield, that is in partnership with the Serum Institute of India. Okay, so this is a brief context. So apart from this, the AstraZeneca actually admitted that there are certain rare side effects which are being associated with the administration of this particular vaccine that is being made by AstraZeneca. Okay, so what are those side effects? They include blood clotting is a side effect, and lowering of the platelet count is also another side effect. So therefore, the withdrawal is actually based on the surplus vaccine stock that is already available. So because surplus vaccine stock is available, what they have done, they have started withdrawal of this particular COVID-19 vaccine. And in fact, the Serum Institute of India has also said that it has stopped the manufacturing and supply of additional doses of Covishield. Okay, so now it has not been manufacturing and supplying the additional doses of Covishield vaccine since 2021. Okay, so it has also reiterated that the Serum Institute of India has already disclosed all rare to very rare side effects, including thrombosis and thrombocytopenia syndrome. So that is with respect to the blood clotting. Okay, so please understand, Serum Institute of India has actually provided Covishield vaccines in India in partnership with the AstraZeneca. So therefore, while delivering these vaccines, the Serum Institute of India has already declared the side effects of using this Covishield vaccine. And in fact, as multiple COVID-19 vaccines have since been developed, there is a surplus stock of these vaccines are available. So therefore, this led to the decline in demand for this particular vaccine which is being developed by AstraZeneca and which is no longer being manufactured or supplied. Okay, so we will try and understand different vaccines which are manufactured by different countries. Okay, so if you look at these vaccines, Oxford, AstraZeneca. So what kind of a vaccine it has actually developed? So it has developed the non-replicating viral vector. Okay, so a viral gene is carried by another non-replicating virus. So what exactly is the replicating? So replicating virus, once it is introduced in a host, it will not replicate, it will not increase its number. So please understand, this is very important because UPSC has already asked a prelims question with respect to these vaccines and their types. Okay, so therefore, a viral gene is carried by another non-replicating non-replicating viral. Okay, so like a Trojan horse that actually tricks the body into activating an immune response. So that is Oxford AstraZeneca's vaccine type. And then the Moderna's NIAID. Okay, so Moderna has come up with the mRNA vaccine. So what was this mRNA vaccine? So RNA, so that is introducing the viral genetic material that actually activates the immune response once it is introduced into the human body. And then the Zydus Cardella vaccine that is manufactured within India. Okay, so this Zydus Cardella that is also known as ZyCoV-D. And in fact, this is a DNA vaccine. ZyCoV-D is a DNA vaccine, and it introduces the viral genetic material that activates the immune response of the body. And next, Bharat Biotech and ICMR together manufactured the Covaxin vaccine. Okay, so this is in fact an inactivated vaccine. So it actually contains pathogens, rather it is an inactivated vaccine. So the viral particles that have been inactivated or made non-virulent, okay, so even if those inactivated virus is being used as a vaccine, they will not further increase the disease severity. So therefore, they will be inactivated and made them non-virulent and introduced to the body to trigger the immune response. Okay, so these are 4 major types of vaccines across the world to deal with the COVID-19 virus. So the next important news article is with respect to under trials, and under trials are actually not given the right to vote. Okay, so that is the concern why under trials are not given right to vote. Okay, so because India is going for the 18th Lok Sabha polls, 18th general elections, but under trials are actually people who are not yet convicted, but they are just accused persons. Okay, so the investigation and trial is going on. So even though the trial has been going on, the under trials are kept in prisons. So under trials are not allowed to vote, and that is a concern. So therefore, blanket ban keeps out over 4 lakh under trials from exercising their franchise. So across various jails in India, there are 4 lakh under trials. So this blanket ban actually keeps out over 4 lakh under trials from exercising their right to vote. So what was the context? So the context is that as voting for the 18th Lok Sabha is actually underway, over 4 lakh under trials in different prisons across various jails have actually barred from exercising their franchise due to a sweeping ban under the law. So what was the law? That we briefly understand. Okay, so we shortly understand. So convicts serving sentences under 2 years are actually allowed to contest elections from the jail. For example, any person who is convicted of 2 years in jail, so he or she allowed to contest elections from the jail itself. However, certain categories of prisoners can actually contest elections. Okay, so however, under trials who are languishing in jails should be given the right to cast the vote. So this is the demand, and this is also a debate that under trials should also be given the right to vote. Now, what actually barred, which legal provision actually barred under trials from voting? Section 62, clause 5 of the Representation of People Act says that no person can vote in any election if confined in a prison, whether as a convict or as an under trial. Okay, so section 62 clause 5 actually says that no under trial will be allowed to vote. However, National Crime Records Bureau data suggesting that 2022 data suggesting that there are around 4,34,302 under trials across various prisons in India. So in fact, they are comprising about 76% of the total jail population that I have highlighted here. However, when we bar these under trials to vote, then 4 lakh people under trials. So we are actually denying them their right to cast their vote. So in fact, the Election Commission can now allow the postal ballots for certain categories of voters within these under trials. and there is no reason why the rule can't be amended, and it can be addressed through the option of postal ballot. So the experts have been suggesting that the postal ballot option should be opened for these under trials so that they can cast their vote. However, the problem here is that it lacks the reasonable classification based on the nature of crime or duration of the sentence for these under trials. And in fact, it is also comes under the violation of Article 14 of the Indian Constitution, right to equality. And in fact, United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights also advocates the universal voting right irrespective of the status of the term of the jail. Okay, so therefore the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights has also advocating strongly for the right to vote of under trial prisoners. However, if you look at these spaces where these prisoners are located, they are actually designated for nomination. So places of nomination. So the candidates who file their nomination papers are secured areas, and voting areas are also, polling booths are also secured areas. But actually, if you look at the jails, so they have a mixed population. They have a different population, including high risk prisoners like terrorists, gangsters, and those who accused of heinous crimes. So this is the counter argument. So while allowing the under trials to go out and vote is a serious safety concern, and in fact, even booths in prison are security threat, and they will necessitate deployment of both police and paramilitary forces to conduct elections in a free and fair manner. Now, who is an under trial prisoner? So under trial prisoner is actually an accused person who is kept in judicial custody during the time their case is being heard in the court. So court is not yet convicted them, but it is just in a trial. So therefore, till the court heard their case, they will be kept in a confinement. And apart from that, they are also denied the voting rights. So under Representation of People Act 62 and clause 5, so they were denied their voting rights. So therefore, denying right to vote does not comply with the requirements of legitimate punishment. So it does not comply with the legitimate punishment. And if a convicted person can vote if she is out on bail, but why the same right is actually denied to under trial who is not yet found guilty of a crime in a court of law? So that is the argument putting forward for providing under trials with the right to vote. Okay, so that's it for today, and I hope that you have gained some knowledge from this discussion, and thank you so much. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.